So where do you work?
Well, I work at Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, Micah. Thank you
All
for
right.
asking that. I also work at SANS, and I also work at a private university. Yeah.
Really? Have you ever
Yeah.
authored a class for the private university?
Indeed, I have just recently authored one,
No
a
way.
mobile forensic. Yeah, it's funny you should ask that. Mobile forensic and IoT class as well. Yeah.
Okay. And what about certifications? You must have certifications.
No, not only have maybe like 13 or 14 of them, it's
13 or
really no
14.
big thing. No, it's yeah, I got a bunch of digital forensic related type certifications.
Cool.
Yeah.
And am I right that you work on a federal task force and you have not only digital forensics, you also have financial crime, OSINT type of investigations, and you have just some amazing experiences within law enforcement as well, right?
I, I feel like you're stalking me a little bit.
No, you submitted a bio to us. I'm just
Oh, okay. All right.
but
Yes, all
so
those
this
things and more. Yeah.
all of those things and more.
Mhm.
So this is Jeff Lomas. Jeff is an amazing speaker, and what I like about his presentation here is that it's not a tools heavy, but it continues the idea that that methodology, that process, and that soft and hard skills are very important throughout your investigations in your OSINT world. So Jeff, I'm going to let you go ahead and take it from here. Thank you so much for presenting today.
Hey, thanks, Micah. Well, hey, everybody, that was a great intro by Micah. And I'll just say that I've been watching here and there. I worked yesterday and done a little bit of work today. I'm going to go work after this. So I'm a busy person. But the reason I did this presentation is because this is a question I constantly get asked, and I never have a really good answer. So part of this was something that I did to help me help other people when they come to me and ask these questions. And part of it is to share that with other people so that if you have basically two spots here. You're either running a digital forensic or excuse me, a cyber investigation or an OSINT type shop yourself, or you're trying to get into that. And so I looked in the channels over here in the Slack. There's the new to OSINT channel. And I'm really uplifted by the people that are in there and the humility of everyone, because this is a very difficult, could be a very difficult realm to get into, because there's so many different things that you need to do. And it just does seem daunting at the bit. So I'll share with you my journey there just a little bit, not too much, but more importantly, the things that you might need to do if you want to be successful in this area. And again, these are things that I've seen throughout everyone, no matter who's here, from what part of the world they're from, no matter who they are, they all have these things in common to a certain extent. Let me go to the next slide here. So a little bit about me. So I have this weird sort of culmination of things that I do every day where, I do work for the government. I'm a detective. I'm a crime fighter at heart. So I've been doing this for almost 13 years now. I work as a detective in our what's called our cyber investigative group. And when you say the word cyber, it's basically like you're just saying anything connected to the internet, which is usually what we get is just a culmination of things. Now, I also work in the private sector for SANS, as Micah mentioned, because I do love teaching, and it really helps me keep my skills strong. Because when you work in one section, and then if you're not in the industry yet, you'll find that you kind of get yourself maybe pigeonholed into a certain area where you're only doing certain things. So there is a tendency that, hey, well, I know everything already. I might get bored. I'm never bored. So you have to be able to delve out there, and that's what I do. On top of that, I'm also in academia. So I do instruct for a private university called Wilmington University. Not a plug for them, but just to kind of let you know where I come from. It's a university out of Delaware. And they give me the latitude to do things like develop courses. I can make small changes to things. And again, it's just another way to get things to keep my skills strong. But the one thing that I notice from all three of these areas, whether I'm at work in my day job, whether I'm working at SANS and instructing, and whether I'm having students at a private university, I get the question is, hey, what do I need to do to get to the next level? What is it that I need to master to do that? And really, it's not just one thing that somebody can master. It's a multitude of things. Let's go to the next slide. So not to bash on Twitter, because I do love Twitter for information sharing, but you get a lot of disinformation out there. And sometimes it's just people going out there, they might be ranting. I'm not going to mention any names, but the other day someone went on there and they said, you don't need formal education, you don't need certs. Well, okay, that's I'm not Snopes, but that's true and partially not true. Depends on who you are. So when you're asking maybe which direction to go, whether you should be getting a formal education in this, whether it be a bachelor degree, a master degree, or if you're going to go ahead and get your certifications, then that's really a kind of a personal choice. Now, one of the arguments is, well, hey, some company might be too expensive or the process is too long. That might be true for you, but if you're trying to get into a certain area you want to work in, and you want to get into maybe a specific company, they might require that you get those certifications, regardless of your formal education, or it might be a combination of both. So the thing about formal education is that it's going to give you a chance to do those things like develop research skills. If you're not already in a job that's doing that, I don't know where else you can really get it from. Now, I did some research for this, and I saw something where this job place was saying, if you're doing your CV or your resume, you shouldn't list more than 6 certifications on your resume. I don't know if that's a thing. I would think the more you list on there, probably the better, and as long as it is something that's relevant. So now we have to figure out what's relevant. So let's go to the next slide. When I say hard and soft skills, now the reason I use these terms is because for part of my master's, when I got my master's, my thesis was my project was basically redoing a local community college's digital forensic the program, because it needed some updating, and really the question was, what skills does someone need to be successful in generally overall in cyber? And we sat down and we looked at this, and actually it was a very complicated problem. But we can divide it down into 2 areas. We have these hard skills, which are things that I would consider things that are teachable, something that you can learn by reading a book, taking a class. Those things are also measurable. So yeah, you have to take tests. You have to show some sort of level of proficiency. And overall, they're something that we would just consider as a technical skill, something that that would set you apart from somebody who doesn't work in this area. So things like learning networks, and we'll talk about that. Now, hard skills are great. You can spend all the money you want in certs. You can spend all the money you want in formal education. You can spend a lot of money there. But if you don't have the side of these soft skills, they won't do much for you. They won't really accentuate or really make you what I would consider a well-rounded OSINT or cyber investigator, whatever it is that you're trying to get into within this field. And so those are things that people have that are more like traits and habits. An example I would use is somebody who has extreme attention to detail on these soft skills. And I don't really mention that. It's kind of in a way, but that's one of those soft skills that I can't, when I think about people that I want to bring into my unit. And again, so I have to choose from people who are already on my department because we don't have an outside position open. So I have to think of things that people have, that those sort of soft skills I can't teach them. I'll never be able to teach it to them. Maybe they'll learn it very slowly over time, and maybe they won't. But those things are generally ingrained into someone. But you can change your soft skills by paying attention to them. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So when we think of hard skills, we have the analytical side. Now, some people could say this is problem solving. We're going to see it's much more than that. We can also look at things like network knowledge. Now, network knowledge is essential when you're working in this field. I mean, literally, we're all on the internet right now. We have to have an understanding of what's going on here. How are these connections being made? What is my IP address coming out? All these things are very, very important to understand. Additionally, now this is where some people get a little tripped up, and including myself, and this is something that's very daunting, is the coding aspect of it. Because sometimes if you've never done it before, it might be something that's very foreign, or somebody sees a command line. I'm not telling you that you need to be some sort of master level coder. Matt Edmondson said it best when he said, coding is just really, writing code is really just block building. And we're going to talk about that, but these are the three things that you can learn and that will make you better doing these things either through search or through school. Next slide. Okay, so when we talk about analytical skills, now you can go to school for something like this. Really what you're doing is you're solving complicated problems. So in my office, one of my best coworkers is someone who has very little sort of cyber experience, but he's an excellent analytical person, able to put these things together and start connecting these things. When I start talking about them, so we're running a very complicated case right now, and we're talking about this very complicated case, how all these different players are involved. He can understand, he can take these concepts and immediately put them into wherever they need to go. Now, how does somebody like that get good at this? How do they connect the dots? Well, yeah, part of it is doing it on a regular basis. He's an analyst. That's what he does. Now, we've kind of tasked him to be a cyber analyst, so he's having to do all these hard skills on the side, but he already has this analytical side, which makes him better than, I would say, a lot of different analysts, because he has these very advanced skills when it comes to putting these things together. So if you wanted to, get better analytical skills and you didn't want to go to school, you could do things like, get involved in these quiz time things like on Twitter and things of that nature, just skills that make you think a little bit harder. And we're actually in a golden age of OSINT right now, because there's so many different areas out there that you can go to, free training that's out there, free problems to solve. There's really not an excuse for not doing this. And we'll see how later on the soft skills really kind of plays there's some soft skills that actually play a role in how well you are as an analytical person. Next slide. Okay, so we were talking about network knowledge before, and this is a very important one. If you are already somebody who knows things about analytics or is able to put that together, this is a technical side of that's going to trip you up the most, and you're going to have to do the boring things. Yes, there are boring things in this place. Well, hey, look, if you like DNS, more power to you. If you've ever written a book like me, like read a IPv6 book, and I wanted to gouge your eyes out at the end of it, hey, you're much better than I am. I've done all these things. I've done the boring things. I continue to do the boring things, because the boring things are actually what makes us smarter and better at this. So, I don't have the photographic memory. I'm constantly having to go over internet protocols. Understanding when I say internet protocols, so internet protocols have been developed over, probably since the late 1980s, and there are things like the mail protocol. Learning things about, the IP protocol itself is a protocol. So learning these things and how these networks work and connect with each other is something that you need to know, because if you're out there, let's say you get a job, you're out there, you might be doing some very, I guess I want to say, high leveraged sort of investigations, and you don't understand the vulnerabilities that might go along with the group that you're investigating, maybe some counter surveillance measures they might be taking, then you're really going to be missing out. That doesn't make you, I would consider, like what I consider a higher or mid or higher tier OSINT or someone who's involved in this, because if you're not going to take the time to learn the basics of these network type things, then you're going to miss really probably 50% of what it is that we do. And the way you can do these things is, yes, certificates, yes, formal education. These are all ways to get these things. Next slide. And finally come to coding. Now relax. So coding is not as bad as it sounds. Actually, my first introduction to coding when I was going to college the first time, when I say the first time, many, many years ago, I learned C++. And I got a B, I think. I was awful. I wasn't good at it. I didn't like it. I understood the basics of it, but I didn't understand what it is I wanted to do with it. And that's what you have to take from coding here. I'm going to pick on Matt again, but Matt is a very talented individual, and Matt Edmondson. And the way he described using Python is the way that a lot of us that are in OSINT, and maybe you aren't some professional coder, can do. You can build it in blocks. You have to take these things in chunks. You take enough Python classes, you get yourself used to these things. The vast majority of OSINT tools, fortunately, are written in Python. Very friendly language when it comes to reading the different arguments and the objects that are within Python. And like Matt said, we can also break these things apart and modify these things, sometimes with writing very little code ourselves. On the other side, we have JavaScript, where JavaScript is just basically what's kind of running the internet right now. It's all over the place. The whole point in looking at these things, and SQL is also another one we find in mobile forensics and computers themselves. The whole thing behind learning any of these, it doesn't matter what it is you learn, learning to identify what these things are is going to help you immensely, even if you aren't some professional coder. You have to expose yourselves to this area. So again, lots of free resources out there. If you want to get more serious about it, I would go for something like certificate. I mean, if you're so inclined to get a computer science degree, that's a long journey, but these things will all make you better at it. Next slide. So let's talk about soft skills. So the soft skills really tie into everything we just talked about. Now, you can argue that some of these soft skills like communication, these things are also hard skills because yes, you can learn how to do these things. But really, when we think about soft skills, we think about the intangible things. As you're an employer, you might have interviewed someone and they have all these, they check off all these boxes. Wow, this person can code, this person can do this. But if they can't communicate, and if this person doesn't really seem maybe interested in what it is that we do, we can't put our fingers on that. But these are what I found is the three most common things that employers, and also just me as I'm not an employer, but I do have to sometimes give a kind of a thumbs up or thumbs down to somebody who might want to come into our unit. These are the things that I look for and the things that I found that are most common. Next slide. So communication can be broken down into three different categories. When we talk about verbal and written, now these things can be learned absolutely in some sort of school sort of environment. You can practice doing things like me, where you can give talks every once in a while. Sometimes some of us are very hesitant to get into this area because it is nerve-wracking to talk in front of a bunch of people. This is actually a great time to start doing talks because you don't have to talk in front of anybody. But on the written side, now this is where formal education comes in. You're not going to get a lot of opportunities to learn this sort of thing unless you start writing. Now, there are new certs out there. I think SANS does offer one of them when we talk about tech writing. So when you're in this position, it's your responsibility to do the nerd stuff, and we do the nerd stuff, and to communicate that to people who are not interested in the nerd stuff, for them to understand it, for them to make sense of it, so that at the end of whatever it is that you're saying about it, they go, oh, this is how I use it. Now, on the etiquette side, I'm going to be very frank here on the etiquette side. That whole thing with the Twitter thing where we have a lot of maybe some toxic communication going on there. If you work in this area, you know that everything is captured these days. No matter if it's LinkedIn or if it's Twitter. I would say that we need a little bit of civility in this world, to say the least, now that we're in February of 2021. So just remember that to be a good coworker, you need to have good etiquette. And I can't teach that. That's something that you have to want within, but this is the intangible things that you're gonna need in communication. And quite frankly, if you're an employer, you have an employee that doesn't have good etiquette, it says something about you as well, that these are things we need to screen for. Next, please. So out of all the traits and soft skills, all these employers on these different sites, I checked them all. They always look for somebody who has curiosity. Curiosity is a great word just to go, hey, well, that's a great thing to want. But what does curiosity really mean? It's self-motivation. It is that employee that listens to podcasts in their own time. So we have the OSINT Curious podcast. I got into this probably about 8 years ago by listening to Security Now podcast. I'm sure there's probably some listeners out there on that that's been running for several years. But these employees, these people, they do this all the time. Nico came on and mentioned that this is what he does. He does OSINT. And he sleeps probably 3 hours a day, but he's a curious individual. If I had enough money and had a big company, Nico would be one of my first people I hire, because you can't make a curious person. So that's why these employers want this. And when you're in this area, you also have to think is, when is the machine going to replace my job? One thing I know is that machines aren't curious quite yet. They haven't become aware yet. So that's the thing that sets you apart and helps you become a better at learning things like network knowledge, like all these different hard skills, is the things that you go extra. You just don't learn the things that just come there. You keep digging and going down those rabbit holes. Next, please. And finally, there's creativity. Now, again, another buzzword, but creativity is nothing more than doing those things. Like, you know, Matt, I keep picking on Matt, but Matt's a very intelligent guy. And he comes on and he goes, hey, it's super simple. You do this and do that, because he's a very creative individual. Some of us, including myself, I have to learn creativity from other people. Don't be afraid to take things from that other people have done. Now, give them credit. This is a big thing about the OSINT world is really great, because we always give each other credit, or at least we should. Give each other credit and go on and build something from something that somebody else has done. Maybe use it in a different way. When I have a case and I think about, there's literally no way I can figure this out. My job is to put somebody behind a keyboard without actually having any video evidence, without doing any of that, and a way to bring all that together. Now, I can't tell you what the answer to that problem is every single time. I just know when I come to it. And you know, my current partner that I work with on federal task force, he is one of the best people at that. Even though he may not have all cyber knowledge right now, that creativity and that curiosity sets him apart, and makes him, quite frankly, another great employee that I would hire if I were an employer. So just remember that creativity doesn't always mean that you have to write this big, huge code yourself. You can have, you know, bring several parts in from other people and put them together. Last slide, please. All right, so how do we go forward here? These things do take time. I told you, I started this, kind of mentioned throughout, I started this journey, the cyber journey, about 8 years ago. I was, you know, working on the streets as a street cop, and I decided that this is something I want to get back into. You have to invest into yourself. If you're not out there encouraging other people, investing in yourself and getting involved in the community, then you're just not going to get there. So I hope you can take all these things, and especially if you're an employer, somebody looking to get in, and you can think about different ways in which you can do that. And really, you look at these things from the last couple of days, these are all things that all these people have in common, is these traits and this knowledge that all of these people have together in different variations. So if you guys have any questions, I'm going to be in the Slack. I'd love to answer your questions. This is one of my favorite areas to talk to people about, and I do get a lot of questions. And so I really appreciate Micah having me on and giving me the opportunity to talk about this.
Thank you, Jeff. And before you go and head over to the Slack, I do have one question for you. And this might be putting you on the spot. And if it's one that you'd rather answer in the Slack, that's fine too. But you mentioned soft skills, and hard skills are really easy to learn, right? There's tutorials on how to code in JavaScript, or you can come to the conference. Do you have any tips for learning soft skills?
Well, yeah. So, you know, one of the main ones is communication. So if you had to focus on one of those the communication side, I mean, you can learn those really easily by taking the opportunity to, every time you're doing an OSINT assessment, let's say, you know, you want to make something that's, you know, graphs and things like that. That's ways to communicate to people. So changing your work ethic, the ways you do things. I learned from, you know, everyone that I see. You know, I see Nico go on into OSINT Curious and talk about all the different ways that you can create, you know, graphs and visualize things. People, that's how you start. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a hard. That's the intangible thing, but that's hard to develop those things.
Okay. And you also mentioned doing things like, talking to a camera, presenting at conferences, although a lot of people might be a little bit more challenged with that. I will add one more thing, and I hope that you're okay with me doing this. There are a lot of people that are out there that are experts like Jeff and like Matt and like Lizette and other people that you've seen this past 2 days that are always willing to mentor people that are looking to grow their soft or hard skills. So reach out to them in the Slack, reach out to them on Twitter, and ask, and you'll be surprised what you get.
Yeah,
Cool.
great community that we're in.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And Jeff is going to be in his hallway channel, which is now on the screen there. And as always, his slides are going to be, if not already are, in your SANS Summit access portal. So thank you, Jeff.